Disturbing Fan Theories, Part 8. There's a long-running fan theory that Kevin McAllister from Home Alone grows up to become Jigsaw from Saw. The connection starts with Kevin's childhood obsession with elaborate traps, rigging blowtorches, swinging paint cans, and setting up nail-piercing steps as the early versions of Jigsaw's sadistic games. Both characters share the same piercing blue eyes and light hair, a calm, calculating demeanor, and a tendency to taunt or psychologically torment their victims. Kevin also grows up in the Midwest, while John Kramer's backstory places him in a similar American setting. Fans point out that Kevin shows no real remorse for the pain he inflicts. He laughs as the wet bandits are electrocuted, burned, and brutalized, and that his creativity seems to flourish under isolation and neglect, a psychological connection to Jigsaw's warped sense of justice. Even the iconic tricycle in Saw has been compared to Kevin's love for riding around on bikes in the Home Alone films. In this theory, the wet bandits weren't just burglars, they were Kevin's first test subjects. What producers got away with on Fear Factor was nothing short of insane. Contestants were fed blended rats, pig rectums, maggots, and even drank donkey semen and urine in a notorious episode so vile that NBC refused to air it. Injuries were common, with some participants hospitalized for stunts that went wrong, one nearly dying from hypothermia after being submerged in ice water, while others were left with concussions, whiplash, and long-term psychological trauma. Host Joe Rogan later admitted the show became absolutely insane, as producers escalated the torture for ratings, ignoring the visible misery of their contestants. Animal rights groups slammed the show for cruelty, as live insects were eaten, snakes were abused, and rats were used in disturbing stunts, all for cheap thrills. Despite its grotesque popularity, Fear Factor was finally canceled twice, with the second cancellation triggered by the infamous Semen Challenge, which many people saw as the moment reality TV officially lost its soul. Morbid Facts, Part 665. In July of 2023, Australian woman Erin Patterson invited her ex-in-laws and their relatives over for lunch, serving them a homemade beef Wellington laced with one of the deadliest fungi on Earth, death cap mushrooms. Within a few days, 3 of them were dead from agonizing organ failure, and a 4th barely survived after a liver transplant. Patterson claimed it was a tragic accident, but investigators found damning evidence, including a food dehydrator tied to the poison and inconsistent stories about where the mushrooms came from. She was recently convicted of 3 counts of murder and likely faces life in prison. In the mid-1800s, women across the Western world wore massive crinolines, hoop skirts that ballooned outward in all directions, often made from highly flammable fabrics like cotton. The size made them elegant but deadly. They caught fire easily near candles or fireplaces, and the sheer width made them nearly impossible to escape the flames. Within just 2 months in 1863, 19 English women burnt to death after their dresses caught fire. By the end of the decade, more than 3,000 people had died as a result of crinoline fires. Morbid Facts, Part 346. In 2004, Thomas and Jackie Hawks decided to sell their 55-foot yacht to spend more time with their family. Soon enough, former Power Rangers actor Skylar Delian contacted the couple saying he was interested in purchasing. Tom and Jackie were suspicious of Skylar at first, but they became more receptive when his pregnant wife Jennifer and their other child came to the next meeting, so they agreed to take him on a test run of the boat. Skylar brought with him 2 associates who, unbeknownst to Tom and Jackie, turned out to be former convicts. Once they were on the boat, the 3 men beat Thomas and Jackie, overpowered them with tasers, tied them up, and forced Thomas to sign the yacht away to Skylar. Afterwards, they tied the couple to the boat's anchor and threw them overboard to drown. Their bodies were never recovered. Days afterwards, Delian tried to empty the couple's bank account, but the entire plot was soon foiled when the accomplices confessed to the heinous murders. Thankfully, Skylar and Jennifer Delian will now spend the rest of their lives rotting away in prison. In January of 2024, 29-year-old Nolan Arbaugh became the first human to receive a Neuralink brain implant after being paralyzed in a diving accident. Though the surgery was celebrated as a milestone, things quickly unraveled. 85% of the device's threads retracted from his brain, crippling its function. Neuralink scrambled to deploy emergency software fixes just to keep it working, allowing Nolan to play chess and move a cursor with his thoughts. The surgery carried serious risks, including infection, brain damage, and long-term complications. Arbaugh's implant was never removed, and the company hasn't disclosed the full extent of its ongoing effects. In 2017, retired U.S. Army Colonel David Will Riggins was awarded $8.4 million in a defamation lawsuit after a woman publicly accused him of raping her decades earlier when they were cadets at West Point. Just as Riggins was being considered for promotion as Brigadier General, the accusation was posted on a blog, effectively derailing his military career. But an investigation soon found no supporting evidence, and a Virginia jury later determined the woman's claims were provably false. Although the final payout was reduced to around $2.3 million, Riggins said he was grateful to have his name cleared, even if the damage to his career couldn't be undone. Morbid Facts, Part 664. In 2013, Caleb McGilvery, aka Kai the hatchet-wielding hitchhiker, went viral after a wild TV interview where he described stopping an attacker with a hatchet, shouting, "Smash! Smash! Smash!" But just a few months later, he was arrested for the murder of 73-year-old lawyer Joseph Galfy in New Jersey. Galfy was found beaten to death in his own home, as Kai had reportedly punched, kicked, and stomped him until he died. Kai claimed it was self-defense after being drugged and sexually assaulted, but prosecutors said there was no evidence in his favor. He was convicted of first-degree murder in 2019 and sentenced to 57 years in prison. In 2014, Jose Salvador Alvarenga was rescued after surviving 438 days lost at sea, a journey that began when his fishing boat was blown off course in Mexico. He drifted over 6,000 miles across the Pacific in a small boat, surviving by eating raw fish, turtles, and seabirds, while drinking rainwater, turtle blood, and his own pee. When he finally washed ashore in the Marshall Islands, he was sunburnt, emaciated, and clutching a knife in terror. Though his story was initially met with skepticism, experts later confirmed it was entirely plausible, setting the record for the longest solo survival at sea by far. Morbid Facts, Part 349. Here's a 2016 photo of American singer Christina Grimmie hours before she was killed at her own concert. She was signing autographs after performing and was approached by 27-year-old Kevin James Loibel, who didn't say a word. Assuming he was just being shy, Christina opened her arms to greet him with a hug. That's when Loibel pulled out a Glock and shot her 3 times, twice in the chest and once in the head. Police didn't offer a motive for the senseless shooting, but said that Loibel had an extremely unhealthy and unrealistic infatuation with the singer. The purpose of this medical device will make you shiver. It's a restraining device used to immobilize infants during circumcisions. In 1988, skydiver Ivan McGuire was shooting a parachuting lesson from 10,000 feet in the air. Excited to film, he grabbed his camera and jumped from the plane, but soon realized that he made a fatal mistake. Ivan had forgotten his parachute and recorded his final moments before plummeting to Earth. Tila Tequila was one of the internet's first ever influencers, rising to fame on MySpace before landing an MTV dating show that made her a household name. But after the spotlight faded, her life spiraled into chaos, marked by heavy drug use, mental breakdowns, and increasingly disturbing behavior. She once claimed to have died and been resurrected, called herself the Queen of the Alt-Right, and posed in Nazi uniforms giving the Hitler salute in front of Auschwitz. After being banned from several platforms including Twitter and Facebook, Tila later declared herself a celestial being who was sent here to destroy Satan. In 1967, Singapore was gripped by a bizarre mass panic known as Coro, or genital retraction syndrome, where thousands of men became convinced their schlongolians were shrinking into their bodies and that they would die if it vanished completely. Fueled by rumors that tainted pork was to blame, hospitals were flooded with terrified men clutching their groins, some even using clamps or strings to hold it in place. Over 400 cases were reported within just a few days. Pork sales plummeted, and public health officials had to step in to calm the chaos. Morbid Facts, Part 662. In the early 90s, Andrew Martinez became a bizarre campus icon at UC Berkeley for attending classes completely nude, claiming he was protesting what he saw as oppressive social norms. Nicknamed the Naked Guy, he was repeatedly arrested, eventually expelled, and banned from campus after the school changed its policies just to stop him. But behind the act was a deepening struggle with mental illness that was later diagnosed as schizophrenia. Over the next decade, his life unraveled into a cycle of homelessness, institutionalization, and jail time. In 2006, at just 33 years old, Martinez was found dead by suicide in a Santa Clara jail cell. In 1965, 22-year-old Lester Eubanks brutally murdered 14-year-old Mary Ellen Diener after attempting to rape her behind a house near a laundromat, shooting her twice, going home to change, then returning to bludgeon her to death with a brick upon realizing she was still alive. He was sentenced to death, but in 1972, just 3 days before his scheduled execution, Lester's sentence was commuted when Ohio temporarily suspended the death penalty. Declared a model prisoner, Eubanks was granted a bizarre privilege the next year, an unsupervised Christmas shopping trip at a mall. At some point, he walked away and simply vanished, and has been on the run ever since. This is why you should never trust a pair of twins. Morbid Facts, Part 93. Ever since they were little kids, twins June and Jennifer Gibbons refused to speak to anybody other than each other. They were disturbingly inseparable and seemed to use a private language that only they could understand. By the time the girls turned 18, they had committed numerous criminal offenses and were sent to a high-security mental hospital in 1981. Years before this, they apparently made a long-standing agreement that if one of them died, the other must begin to speak and live a normal life. After 12 years at the asylum, they decided it was time for one of them to die, and Jennifer agreed to make the sacrifice. In March of 1993, Jennifer was taken to the hospital where she soon died from a sudden inflammation of the heart. There was no evidence of drugs, poison, or alcohol in her system. It was almost as if she just died out of nowhere. Afterwards, June said she was finally liberated from her sister and was eventually released from the hospital. She now speaks to others and has lived a relatively normal life ever since. In the 1990s, Belgium was shaken by the horrific case of Marc Dutroux, a convicted predator who, after early release from prison, built a hidden soundproof dungeon beneath his home. In 1995, he kidnapped two 8-year-old girls named Julie and Melissa and locked them inside the chamber. Later that year, he was jailed for several months after stealing a car and left the girls trapped in the basement. Dutroux claimed he told his wife to feed them, but she never did, and the girls slowly starved to death in total darkness. When police finally searched the home 1 year later, they found their bodies buried in the yard along with 2 more victims, teenage girls that Dutroux had drugged, abused, and murdered. Investigators had previously searched the home but missed the hidden cell, ignoring repeated warnings and reports of screams from neighbors. The public was completely outraged as over 300,000 people marched silently through Brussels in what became known as the White March, Belgium's largest protest since World War II. Morbid Facts, Part 660. When Alexander the Great died in 323 BC at the age of 32, his body reportedly showed no signs of decomposition for 6 days, astonishing the ancient Greeks and fueling the belief that he was a god. But modern medical experts have proposed a much darker explanation. Alexander may have suffered from Guillain-Barré syndrome, a rare neurological disorder that causes full-body paralysis while leaving the person mentally aware. If true, it means he may have been mistakenly declared dead while still conscious, and was ultimately buried alive, fully aware of what was happening but unable to move or speak. In 1969, the Black Panthers launched a free breakfast program that fed thousands of hungry kids before school in the poorest black communities. But J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI saw it as a threat to national security, apparently fearing that it would make the Black Panthers look too humane. So in response, in multiple cities, police raided kitchens at dawn, tearing apart food supplies and in some cases even urinating on the groceries, making it clear that feeding black children was more threatening than letting them starve. Most Morbid Facts, Parts 500 to 600. Adult star Emily Willis was left permanently disabled after a medical crisis at a rehab facility treating her for ketamine addiction. She reportedly suffered a heart attack and wasn't hospitalized in time, leading to 40 minutes of CPR, severe oxygen loss, and irreversible brain damage. After 2 months in a vegetative state, she now suffers from locked-in syndrome, a condition where the patient is conscious but can't move any muscles except the eyes. These photos from 1999 show Columbine student Dustin Gordon after being told the shooters were his good friends Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold. Dustin was reportedly a very nice kid and couldn't fathom his friends killing 12 innocent students. In 2004, Gail Laverne Grimes died in the hospital after surgeons spent 6 exhausting hours trying to separate her skin from a couch. The 500-pound woman had been sitting on her living room sofa for 6 years to the point where her skin had completely fused to the fabric. Rescue workers had to transport Gail in her couch using a trailer, and she ended up dying while still attached to it. This 15th century Italian painting is the earliest known depiction of the guinea worm, a parasite that enters through dirty water and grows into a 3-foot-long worm that painfully erupts from the skin. Splashing water on the wound eases the burning but triggers the worm to release more larvae, only repeating the cycle. In 1986, there were over 3.5 million cases, but the numbers have dropped off significantly ever since. In 2010, a Russian man died after being voluntarily buried alive by his friends. He was simply trying to overcome his irrational fear of dying when the ground suddenly caved in and crushed him. Grape had become such a big problem across Africa that a South African doctor invented Grape-X in 2005. It's a device with sharp teeth that gets inserted into a woman's private area. Any man who attempts to grape her will impale himself on the teeth and must go to a hospital to have the device removed. According to historians, we would have a lot more ancient Egyptian mummies intact today if so many of them weren't eaten during the Victorian era. People used to believe that the ground-up corpses of ancient Egyptians could cure different ailments. There's a room in the basement of Oregon State Hospital known today as the Room of Forgotten Souls. In 2004, hundreds of copper cans were discovered holding the remains of 3,600 mental patients who were cremated on site since 1917. Liam Ashley was a 17-year-old boy from New Zealand who had criminal charges pressed against him by his parents for using their car without their permission. His parents denied bail so that he would be sent to prison and hopefully learn his lesson. While being transported in a prison van. Morbid Facts, Part 214. Joaquin Phoenix's older brother River was a much bigger star than Joaquin in the 1990s. But in '93, the 23-year-old died of a heroin overdose while partying with members of the Red Hot Chili Peppers at Johnny Depp's nightclub on Halloween. Joaquin was the one who found River and called 911 for help, but it was too late. An award-winning middle schooler science fair project showed that on average, 70% of the ice found at fast food restaurants is dirtier than toilet water. In 1955, John Graham hated his mother so much that he hid 25 sticks of dynamite and a timed detonator in her suitcase before her flight. It was one of the first ever attacks of a commercial flight, and all 44 people on board were killed. 2016, 23-year-old Colin Scott was trying to feel the temperature of a Yellowstone hot spring when he suddenly slipped and fell in. When his body was found floating later that day, the water temperature was measured to be right around boiling point. Emergency services were unable to retrieve Scott's body until the next day, by which point it was completely dissolved, leaving nothing but his wallet and flip-flops. Morbid Facts, Part 349. In 2013, Zac Efron was running through his house with socks on when he suddenly slipped. He smashed his face into the corner of a granite fountain so hard that it shattered his jaw and nearly killed him. He was immediately knocked unconscious, and when he woke up, part of his chin was hanging off his face. In response to more recent plastic surgery rumors, Zac claimed that his cheek muscles overgrew to compensate for the muscles that were permanently damaged from that injury. Union Army soldier Jacob Miller was shot in the forehead during the Civil War. Left for dead, he somehow woke up a few hours later and lived on for another 54 years. Mac Ray Evans was a serial killer who used to work for Caltrans throughout the 1950s and 60s. He'd bury his victims, who were mostly children, in places where he would later help build the highways on top of. Many of his victims were never found and are likely still under some of the California highways that thousands of people drive over each day. Morbid Facts, Part 427. In 1998, SNL star and renowned voice actor Phil Hartman was shockingly killed in his sleep by his wife Brynn. She then showed her friend the body, locked herself in a bathroom, and turned the gun on herself. Futurama's Philip J. Fry was named in honor of Phil Hartman, who was supposed to be the voice of Zapp Brannigan before he died. About 50% of panda births result in twins, but panda moms always focus on raising their strongest cub while letting the other ones starve to death. Therefore, zookeepers have to switch the cubs every few hours to trick the mom into caring for both. In 2019, a horrific bungee cord accident caused this Taiwanese man's iris to completely collapse. Morbid Facts, Part 658. On July 14, 2017, Chester Bennington appeared in a carpool karaoke episode with comedian Ken Jeong. In the video, Chester looks joyful and full of life, laughing, cracking jokes, and singing along to Linkin Park hits as well as popular songs like Hey Ya. The footage offers a bittersweet glimpse of a man who appeared to be genuinely happy just 6 days before he tragically took his own life. In 1993, a Mexican zoo official was arrested in Miami after trying to illegally purchase a live gorilla, only to discover the animal was actually an undercover agent in a gorilla suit. The operation was part of a federal wildlife trafficking bust and led to one of the most ridiculous arrests in American history. As a child in the Philippines, boxing legend Manny Pacquiao ran away from home after witnessing a horrifying act. His father, drunk and enraged, killed and ate the family's pet dog. Devastated, Pacquiao fled and began living on the streets, sleeping in a cardboard box and surviving by selling donuts and scraps. The trauma of watching that happen to his beloved pet pushed him into a life of brutal survival at just 12 years old, an early glimpse of the hardship and violence that would define his relentless drive in the ring. These are some morbid facts about Justin Bieber. The city of London, Canada, where both Justin Bieber and Ryan Gosling were born, used to have the highest concentration of serial killers in the world. When JB's mom, Patty Mallet, was a little girl, her 5-year-old sister was struck and killed by a car while she was crossing the street. Patty's childhood was riddled with sexual abuse as she went on to become a thief and drug dealer and once tried to take her own life. She survived but was admitted to a mental hospital and got pregnant shortly after her release. Due to her troubled past and young age, the 17-year-old was pressured by multiple people to abort the baby, but she refused. That baby was Justin Bieber. Diddy's 2 sons, Justin and Christian Combs, allegedly once ran a train on Justin Bieber while he was tied down and sobbing. A young girl who witnessed this happening is reportedly part of an upcoming lawsuit against Diddy. The rapper allegedly slapped her when she tried to loosen the straps on Bieber. A 42-year-old Russian fisherman was viciously attacked by a bear in 2014, but his life was spared when the ringtone his granddaughter installed onto his phone suddenly went off. Justin Bieber's song Baby miraculously sent the bear running back into the woods. Justin Bieber is the 5th most hated man according to a US poll that includes murderers. In 2013, a paparazzi photographer named Christopher Guerra was crossing a busy street to get better photos of Bieber's Ferrari when he was fatally struck by a passing car. Bieber later released a statement expressing his condolences to the photographer's family, while calling for meaningful legislation to protect the lives and safety of celebrities as well as photographers.